Hello and welcome to the first installment of the Vassal Armada for Editors tutorial series. This is Green Knight from the forum, FFG forums speaking. Unlike my how to use Vassal tutorials, this one is going to look at how you edit the module. So let's start by looking at some of the basics. Okay, there is something called the Vassal Designer's Guide, version 3.1. It's for the 3.1 version. We're currently at 3.2.17, so there are some minor differences, but most of what's written in here goes for the current version too. So if you haven't read this document, you should definitely start with that. Not read it from start to finish, but you should leaf through it at the very least, and to get familiar with some of the core concepts and that sort of thing. Next you need Java, of course, and Vassal, and the Armada module. That's a good starting point. I don't have really much of a storyboard here. I'm just talking off the top of my head, so bear with me. Okay, so let's start by looking at the module. If you haven't added it, you can open module or go directly to edit module. Say it's a new version and just click it, and then it will have to tile and it will open in editing mode. You can also see the various extensions here, and a good way to learn how to use the editor is to create your own little test extension. Maybe create some fan-made alternate cards, make some upgrades for instance, scale the graphics, import them, make sure they show up in the menus, that sort of thing. Not because you need to publish this extension, but just to become familiar with how it works. So it starts by edit module. And it looks like this. This is the editing window right here. Up top we have well, that's the same window you see when you play the game. So while editing, you can always start games and sort of check that what you've done comes out okay, so you don't have to close the editor then start the module, test, close, open for editing. You can just test while editing. So that's kind of cute, handy. Yeah, there are a few things that you can't do this with. You have to sort of exit the module and start it again before the changes are applied, but that's a bit more advanced, so we can get back to that later. So I'm just gonna pull that one up here and release it so it becomes a bit bigger. I don't think I need to go full screen with this one. It has a standard menu here, basically save and save as, and it has some cut, copy, paste, and move. Properties, I don't use that very often. Control P, what the heck is that? Oh, of course, you just sort of open it. You can click it and Control P. It's the same, but Control C, Control V, very handy. Copy paste or Control M if you want to move stuff. Then you get a drop down menu where you can move it. In some instances it's important in which order things appear in the menus, but most of the time it's a cosmetic thing. Okay, so we'll leave this for later. If you double click the module, it has a name, Star Wars Armada. There should be really be a colon here, but no. Oh, we're on the... Okay, we're over on English keyboard. I'm used to Norwegian keyboard, so some of the special characters are located elsewhere. So I'm gonna change that back. And a version number. This is my development build. It's built off the 360 branch. I use these notes to keep track of some changes. I had an alternate branch that didn't pan out, so that one's dead. And this is the current version, and the T stands for texted. For copyright reasons, I always replace the texted graphics with clean graphics before releasing the module. So whenever I make a new version, I go here, either this save as button or save as here, and let's say I was making the beta 4. Yeah, why not? Let's call it the beta 4, and I would save it there, and I would double click here, and I will call it B4 demo for JJ and anyone else watching. Okay, and save changes. I used to save changes all the time. That's just the standard Control S. So we can just walk through the menu here, and the neat thing is that the handbook it's incredibly good for a freeware program. This is very unusual, and every part of this menu is covered in the manual. So, but instead of sort of reading through it from end to end, it's better to look up what you're doing then and there. So we have the help menu. The help menu is not terribly important, but it governs what you find up here. So basically I have put in a lot of links, so when you hit the cannot get your ship out, that's new, is quite good, then it pops in, and I have some older links here. Intensive 5-forward firepower, probably dead. Twitch Armada channel, not very active, but okay. This one defines player sides. You can have war games where you have, say, 2 or 3 sides. You can have a World War II simulator or perhaps a Cold War, Second World War, Cold War kind of thing, where you have allies, Axis, or you could have Axis communists and allies, something like that. But you could have players running a country. So you could have Germany, Italy, Japan, and those 3 players could be part of the side called Axis. But in Armada we don't have any sides as such. I know what you're thinking: Empire and Rebels, of course, and the Karelian conflict, but it's not really useful. So sides are defined as player 1 through 6. So each player is his own side. Yeah, and those sides can be used for various things elsewhere in the module. Okay. Sorry. Global options, not really anything you'd need to change. just leave as is. The table part, that's a fairly big one, and it's fairly involved. And I'll try to explain what the different parts are. You have this section here, map boards, that's the actual graphics. So the blue-green rift refers to this file name, which adds that image to the image directory in the module. When we're talking about that, let's just open a module. Here it is. I use WinRAR. You could probably use 7-zip or something. The module is just an archive. So click it, and this is an web page that I've embedded in the module. Module data. That's just the version number, etc. The build file. Sorry, 2 seconds. The build file is in plain text. This is everything that you can do, and in the editor in plain text. So you could just forgo the entire editor, but of course it's much too complicated for normal people to. But some things are easier to edit directly here. Okay, sounds library, and you have the sound for black, for example, and this one is important, the image directory, and every piece of graphics that comes with the module are stored in here. So when I clean out the textured images, for example, I just overwrite dual turbolaser turrets gets overwritten by a blank turbolaser turrets. Okay, so that's the actual table. Background, and you have some other options here. We can work through those later, maybe a tutorial about just making maps and tables. And you have the line of sight tool definitions, and you have something called global key commands, and I've tried to name them as to make sense. So this global key command is the button in the map window. Okay, let's go new game. Okay, not what happened now. That was very strange. Close game. I think it got stuck or something. This is real. I think I have to close the module and restart it. Okay, here is what you see. Now we have a new version, and I need to tile the graphics. And this should be familiar. Yeah, I'm not doing that right now. So edit, file, new game. Okay, there it is. Next, and table. Let's just kind of do this. So the straighten tool is linked to here. So whenever you push the button, you use the hotkey Control S or push the actual button, of course. Then it sends out a global key command, Control S, and a global key command propagates throughout the module, and every piece in the module that hasn't sort of been limited off will be looking for this key command, Control S. Note that you don't have to have the same hotkey as a key command. You could have F12 as the actual hotkey, and pressing F12 or the straighten tool button would send Control S throughout the module. So every piece in the module that has a command to respond to do something whenever it receives Control S will then do whatever it's supposed to do. So I'm just going to cancel that. And in case of straighten tool, there's not a lot of things that respond to this Control S. It's only things that have to do with the various segments of the maneuver tool. The maneuver tool itself is very complicated, so I'm not going to go into that right now, but the important part is that you have hotkeys, you have global key command, and you can have actions on different pieces that respond to these global commands. So an easier example is the report set. The remove tool does the same. It sends, the hotkey is Alt Control Space, but the key command sent is Alt Control Shift D. And what responds to that? The maneuver tool gets deleted, and all range and distance overlays get deleted. And there are some other things in the module that also have Alt Control Shift D as a trigger. So in this case we have an additional check of matching properties. This segment less than 5. Those are the segments 1, 2, 3, 4 and base of the maneuver tool, and ship has to do with ship overlays, and squad with squad. The straighten maneuver tool, that's segment 0, because it keeps the first base segment, it deletes the other ones and puts them back in place straight. An easier example is this one. Control Enter as the hotkey and Control Enter as the key command, and what this basically does is trigger a report. You see that here. This is very simple because the actual report is specified in the same so I could put in here player name straighten the maneuver tool, but that's sort of superfluous. But the report set sends a report, and then I also have a little something that makes the sound trigger. Okay. And this is also a good example. The status phase refresh, it doesn't even have a hotkey. You have to press the actual button, and then it does Alt Control Shift R, and it has to be a turn number bigger than 0. And what this one triggers is flipping the initiative token, refreshing defense tokens, exhausted cards, that is sort of thing. So you also have something called start stacks. Well, I'm not sure if we should go into that but in detail right now, but these define the various components in the map window. When I press the setup area, it's this one here that governs it. When I press the ambush zone, and you have the blockade run set up, and you have these are the obstacles that start here, and you have the spawn points here. So if I want to have the spawn points up, if I want the Imperial spawn point to appear somewhere else, I could click it and I could change the coordinates there to make it appear further to the right or left or up or down. And I can also, I could replace it. I could put something else in there. I could, I don't know, make a completely new token, but that makes no sense. Okay. Game piece image definitions not used in Armada, so I'm not going to cover that. Global properties, these have to do with the maneuver tool, the joints of the maneuver tool. Also very complicated. I think we're going to save that for last. Game piece prototype definitions. We are going to talk about those after we have talked about some other things. Game pieces. Okay, game pieces. That's basically all the stuff you can see in the pieces menu. Simple as that. So all definitions of every piece in the game that can be manipulated are found here. And you can see it's a mix of tabbed panels and scrollable lists and so forth. Here you can see I have a hotkey F3, graphics, button text, tooltip text, and menu name. I can hide it so people don't see it. That's not very smart in this case. And this is one of the things that needs a module restart for visibility to be updated. So, and it's a mix of scrollable lists and tabbed panels. Those are fairly intuitive. Tabbed panels, scrollable lists, yeah, okay. And here we have the commands, text and everything, and you have objectives with submenus, and you have obstacles, you have tokens, the stations, Empire, Rebel, upgrades, and some of the campaign components. And a piece needs to be defined in several ways. And I'm gonna start with the very simplest, and then we can go back in a later tutorial to look at them in more detail. Let's just look at Intel Officer. They all have to have this basic piece, and that's basically just the naming. You can put in an image there, but don't usually do that because you can't really do anything with that image. You can't, for example, flip the card and have a card back. And here you have something called a prototype, and this point where we skipped game piece prototype definitions. So what this does is we have basic piece, we have a name for it, and then we have a prototype, meaning that it shares the same characteristic with every other upgrade card. Okay, and this is pretty important and very time saving, because otherwise you would have to add a lot of extra traits to every single component. So instead you can define all the traits that are in common for all cards or components of that type, and then you can just put in a prototype. And prototypes are defined here. You see there are a lot of prototypes, and let's see if we can find this one, upgrade card prototype. Yeah, it's not a very complex one, but it's 3 lines saved. So it's the ability to delete, to clone or copy, and it sets a marker layer that's called card. So you can have other types of cards, and then you can elsewhere in the module use traits that affect cards only but leave ships untouched, for example, such as when sending global key commands. You want those global key commands to hit just some specific kind of components. Okay. While we're at it, we can just look here and keyboard command Control D, delete, clone, Control C, and it's not more complicated than that. And of course, delete is defined as a core function of Vassal, so you can find it somewhere in here, and it removes that component entirely, unless you hit undo, which brings it back, of course. And clone is also predefined, so you just pick them up from the menu. You don't kind of tell the module what delete does, because that's already defined. All that you can do is tell the module what kind of keyboard command triggers delete. And basically you can have a lot of commands without the corresponding keyboard command. If I do this and then OK and OK, then I can still right click the card, and well, you can't do everything. I can flip it here, but I can't delete it, for example, or clone it. I can exhaust it, but I can't unexhaust it. Okay, never mind that. I lost my train of thought there. Yeah, you can have delete. That was my point. There, delete. I can remove that Control D there, and okay, and then it's gone. I can't use that anymore. So delete Control D. I'm gonna put that back. Okay, and then I managed to close Intel Officer. That was not my intention. Okay, and now we have something called layers that has to do with graphics, and you get this dialog. Then you have two images. One is the front and one is the back, and you have a command here. You always it's always active. One of the layers will always show. You can have some graphics that are sort of invisible, that are triggered whenever. So you have two levels here, level 1, level 2, and every time you press the key command Control F, it increases and it loops, so it goes from 1 to 2 to 1 to 2. So sort of every time you press Control F, you will flip the card over. And of course the image back is the same for all officers, but it's a different one for every officer. So basically, if you were making a new officer, you could do it like this. You could, okay, just one more thing. Another prototype, this one is exhaust upgrade card. It's a fairly straightforward one, or it's a bit more involved than that. It can pivot about its axis, and it can rotate, can pivot, can rotate, and there is, if you remember the refresh button, it sent out a global key, the global key command that didn't have a key, so you had to press the button, and it sent Alt Control Shift R, and it will refresh the upgrade card, because when the upgrade card gets this command, it does left, which is unexhausted, and there is also a report that player has unexhausted or player has exhausted. And restrict command, it just means that if the card is already refreshed, if it's at 0 degrees rotation, you can't hit the you can hit the left button, but nothing happens. And same with If it's not rotated 0 degrees, you can rotate it. That's probably a bit clunky, because that means you can sort of press right and spin it around. So I should probably make some you should only be allowed to rotate it right if well, but it's not that important, so I haven't really looked at it. Intel officer, yeah. Let's make a new officer card based on Intel officer, and I'm using this because it's going to be an officer card, and it's going to be exhaustible. So I could do copy or control C, copy, and I'm gonna control V. I'm just standing at the node I want it in, and it appears here. And then I will double click it again, and it's no longer Intel officer, it will be called JJ's Juggernaut. It's probably 2 G's. Jugger. Well, it's not that important. And it's an upgrade, no change there. Layer officer, officer back, and it should have some new graphics. I have no idea what this is. Well, I have an idea. Okay, we're just gonna utter rubbish, of course, but if you flip it now, it's officer, and you flip it back, so you get the point. And you can exhaust it, but you can't unexhaust it, and you can keep spinning it around. Okay, might want to look into that. It's a small detail, but still annoying when stuff like that comes up. And I'm gonna go control M, and I want them alphabetically, so I'm gonna put him before I, J, before navigation officer. Okay, hooray, we made a new card. And I'm gonna go control S, or press the save button. Yeah, and that's pretty much what I do for all the upgrades. So upgrades are simple. If you look under Empire here, now you're a Rebel player. Let's look under Rebel. Now you play by both factions. Okay, you have capital ships, squadrons, commanders, and unique officers. Commanders and unique officers are exactly the same as other upgrades. And capital ships, of course, these are just the cards, the ship cards. No difference here really, but there are some other functions. It's a basic piece, and the layers are ship cards, and the prototype is ship card prototype, so that shares some characteristic. It's a card, but it's not an upgrade card. And there is a function to bring another game piece into play. This one, for example, it spawns a command. So by pressing Ctrl Shift A, while you have this card selected, brings out the command stack, and doing Ctrl S brings out the ship model. And this is the basis of the quick spawn system. Okay, place marker. That's what makes the quick spawn system possible. The same with squadrons. We have the squadron cards. Yeah, and you can spawn squadrons. And there is, of course, no command stack. Then we have the actual ships, the ship models, and they are a bit more involved, as you can see, and a lot of traits. And we're also going to talk later about how the order of the traits are important. They have to come in. Basic piece has to come on top, and the text labels have to come far down, or they might rotate with the ship when it turns, for example. Those are just some examples. Or graphics may disappear behind other graphical elements, so you want the overlays up on top so that they don't blur out the ships and shield dials and so forth. And this doesn't look that complicated, but then start counting the number of prototypes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if you start looking at those prototypes, sort of the small ship defense tokens, and then it starts with some layers. Those are the actual tokens, and then it refers again to another prototype, because prototypes can contain prototypes. And wow, defense token definitions. Oh my god, look at this. This is starting to get very dynamic. Properties, submenus, trigger actions, restriction commands, reports, and it's like that with all of them. Not everything is complicated, of course. For instance, hull value, it starts at 5 and can go to 6 because of money, and here are the commands that increase or decrease it. That should be familiar. And hull value text, this defines the color and positioning of the and so forth. We can look at ships in more detail later, but this is the reason. If you remember, a while back I was doing some betas in an earlier version, and I was trying to do something about defense tokens or something that they didn't work out like they were supposed to. I don't remember what it was, but I chose a very complicated solution, and the end result was that there were too many calculations every time you did something, so the game slowed to a halt. So this is starting to push the limit of what the module can do. So if you're gonna put more functionality on the ships, for example, we have to find new and smarter ways of doing existing things to cut down on calculations. Okay, squadrons are the same, only a bit simpler. There are quite a bit of prototypes here, but they are much simpler in general. So you could start with upgrades, then go on to squadrons, and then start looking at ships. But you always have to refer over to the prototypes and sub-prototypes to actually figure out what's going on. And okay, and then you have some things are very straightforward. The objectives and the tokens and the obstacles, they are semi-simple, but they can be flipped, and they have some clever things that actually make the distance overlay swap over to the flipped or unflipped objective and make them turn alongside. So we can look a bit at those later. These tokens are pretty simple. The only interesting things here are some stuff to make the token flip when the refresh button is pressed. Yeah. Under essentials you have the command stacks. Those are not so simple, so I don't think we should go into those yet, because here are a lot of dependencies and dynamic properties and reporting, and yeah, so we can look at those in a more advanced tutorial. And here, hidden launches regular pellet in blah blah. That this is the maneuver tool, and you don't want to start with that because that is quite complex. So you could try making a small extensions and maybe add some upgrades, a squadron, maybe try your hand at the ship translations. I'm not gonna do those, so I don't care. A turn counter, very simple, not gonna say anything about that. dice we're gonna come back to. Player hands, those are these the damage deck, and it's basically a map board that's visible to other players, but they just can't pull cards from it because it's restricted to a side. And if we see, never mind the rebel here, that was just some experiments I did earlier, but this belongs to player 1, so only player 1 can manipulate this this map window. And here is the definitions, all the cards, and there is of course functionality to randomly draw. We can talk about that later, but what's peculiar is that if you draw a card, then put it back with undo, and then draw again, it will randomly draw another card. So it's not like real life where if you draw a card and then put it back on top, you will draw that card every time. I have tried to change that, but limitations in the module has made that very hard. Here is some stuff about campaigns, Carillion campaign map, and the test campaign I made, and the scenario and reference charts, and the notes window. Yeah, let's not talk about that either. And then we come to dice. Next after the maneuver tool, or perhaps equally complex, is the dice roller. And I did a lot of work on the dice roller because the original version didn't report, so it was very tedious, I thought, to always sort of have to look at this, and nothing got reported, and there were no sounds, and when you change dice or re-roll them, you didn't get notified, so that made things take a lot longer. So with that in mind, I created a lot of auto-reporting as we know it now, but that is incredibly involved. So we could look at the dice roller module. It's quite exciting, I think. I had a look at the X-Wing module to see how they did it. So it's not the exact same application, but I drew some inspiration from there. That's a good idea, by the way. Look at other modules, how do they do it? So if you know the X-Wing module does something, you can open it and look through it and see if you can get any ideas, because the design guide isn't good at that. It lists up all the things that's possible to do, but it doesn't really give you any ideas of how to do what you want or what the limitations are. So there's lots of trial and error, and then it helps a lot to have existing code or module to look at. If you just look at the red dice, for example, it starts out, okay, there are up to 10 red dice, and you clear die and roll however many, and delete dice and reports and add die, and there's dynamic properties and blah blah blah, and every die in addition has a definition, and it gets pretty involved. So I'm not, well, I think that's generally how the module is built. We'll only scratch the surface, of course. And another thing is that I don't work with the module all the time, so it's an on and off kind of thing. So between sessions I usually forget half of what I knew, plus I forget how I did stuff originally. But it was a lot more chaotic, less use of prototypes, and not so standardized as it is now. So I've spent a lot of time sort of cleaning it up, but without the Ransburger's original module, there wouldn't be a module. I couldn't have made this sort of from scratch because I had no previous knowledge of Vassal. I just started picking at it and started to make an extension because I wanted to make some alternate versions of cards and some what if cards and that sort of thing. And then I started playing around with some Warhammer 40k ships and cards for those. Suddenly I was going through the module and trying to figure out how it did things and how I can improve upon things, and then I contributed towards getting wave 2 out. That was the first time I was involved, and after that it sort of, I don't know, I think I liked working on it. I wanted to make it more playable because I felt it was a bit slow and clunky, and my focus was always to speed up play, and I think I've succeeded in that. But I also realized that I've reached a point where I'm pretty comfortable with the way the module is right now, so I don't have any great ideas or aspirations. There are a few things I want to change. I might tweak a few things or add new waves as they come in, but I don't have any grand plans really. So maybe new heads will take it to another level and leave me crying in the ditch. No, I was looking at the X-Wing module the other day, and it has really improved by leaps and bounds. Vassal is a Java based program, and so you can, if you know some Java, I know some but not a lot, you can do things that the editor can't do. It has support for, I don't know what I can call it, plugins maybe, extensions. So over at X-Wing they have done exciting stuff, like you can import the permalink from one of the builder sites, an X-Wing builder sites, and you can paste it into the module, and then it quick spawns that fleet. Wow, that is just awesome. So I had a look at the custom Java classes that they had made, and it was pretty involved, and I realized I don't have the time or inclination to go down that path. And more recently, it now reports on overlaps. Now that would be awesome for Armada too, huh? Imagine your ISD. Did I overlap the enemy ship or not? You can get a report, and then you undo, you go back and then land on another ship and you get a report. Also way too involved. It's just not worth the effort. Maybe the setup function, I could probably make that work if I had the time and the inclination, but some of the other things, no. We're a smaller community and there is very little gain. So, but then again, maybe someone else will take up the torch and carry the module forward. I'm not abandoning it, but I'm saying I'm pretty comfortable where it is right now. So I think I've been speaking for 50 minutes now, so it's time to wrap things up. You're probably bored hearing my voice. We need to come back and look in greater detail to begin with at table, and by extension player hands, and we're gonna go through the game pieces and some of the prototypes in more detail. And eventually we'll have to look at the quick spawn functionality, which will teach you a lot about prototypes, and we need to also look at the maneuver tool which I sincerely hope you don't have to do anything with. It works, so you shouldn't have to worry about it. And the dice roller, which also works. But it's nice to know how it works. I think could be a strange occurrence that Armada suddenly has green dice, or you know, stuff happens. So we need to be prepared for that. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for listening.